Picture this, it's August of 2017, down in Texas. In a monster of a storm, Hurricane Harvey, a Category 4, is just barreling towards the coast. I mean, people are scrambling, evacuating, bracing for the absolute worst. But right in the middle of all that chaos, a 37-year-old mother of two, a woman named Crystal McDow, she just disappears, vanishes.
And that really is the chilling reality of this whole case. You've got first responders just completely overwhelmed with life or death calls. The floodwaters are rising, and one investigator has this terrible thought. This storm, it might just be the perfect cover for a crime.
So let's dive right in. The date is August 25, 2017. Hurricane Harvey is churning offshore, getting ready to make landfall. And for Crystal McDow, the day starts like any other. She has absolutely no idea it's going to be her last.
I mean, her day was supposed to be totally normal. She leaves her boyfriend's house around 7:10 in the morning. The plan? Just to swing by her ex-husband Steven's place to pick up her kids. Simple. But she never got there. And by that evening, her uncle, who was always in touch with her, gets this awful feeling. Her silence is just not like her at all. So he does what you do. He calls 911.
But here's the thing about calling 911 during a hurricane like Harvey. It's like trying to shout over a jet engine. The city is literally going underwater. Emergency services are in full-on triage mode, dealing with only the most life-threatening calls. A search for one missing person, at that moment, it was impossible.
Okay, so to really understand what happened to Crystal, we need to rewind a little bit. We need to look at her life, and more specifically, at the two men who were right at the center of it.
So who was Crystal McDow? Well, she was a force. I mean, this woman survived an unbelievably tough childhood. We're talking a traumatic kidnapping, and she came out the other side as this successful real estate agent and an amazing mom to her two kids. Her friends said she was a total goofball with this great infectious spirit. But here's the really crucial part. Because of that trauma in her past, she had this ironclad rule. She always let her uncle know where she was. Always. So when she went silent, that wasn't just unusual, it was a massive red flag.
For about 10 years, she was married to a man named Stephen McDowell, and at first, she was really drawn to what she saw as his strong personality. But over time, that whole image just crumbled. He ended up quitting his job, and suddenly, she was the sole provider for the whole family. She came to realize he just wasn't the leader she'd believed him to be. And that pressure, that financial burden, was really the final straw.
So after the divorce, Crystal started a brand new chapter. She was seeing a new guy, Paul Hargrave. And what was it about him? Well, it was everything Stephen wasn't. Paul had this calm leadership, this strong presence. It seems like after 10 years, Crystal could finally see the difference between a man who was genuinely strong and one who just, put on a good show.
So once the storm finally passed and the floodwaters started to recede, the police could finally get to work. But what did they have? A crime scene that was basically washed clean by a hurricane, and two men right at the center of Crystal's life, her ex-husband and her new boyfriend.
Their first big break, if you can call it that, comes when they find Crystal's black Mercedes. It's sitting abandoned in the flooded parking lot of a Motel 6, but the scene is weird. The doors are unlocked, the keys are just sitting inside. It's almost like someone left it there hoping it would just get stolen and vanish forever.
And this was the investigators' single biggest nightmare. Think about it. The hurricane's floodwaters. They acted like a giant eraser, just wiping away any potential DNA, fingerprints, any forensic clues at all. So with no physical evidence, this case wasn't going to be solved in a lab. It was all going to come down to the people and the stories they told.
So investigators had two main people they needed to talk to. First, there's the ex-husband, Stephen. He insists their divorce was totally amicable, that they were still good friends. Then you've got the new boyfriend, Paul. He was the last person to see her, and he says, it wasn't that weird for her to be out of touch for a few hours when she was working.
And then comes a twist that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. The police are trying to figure out who to focus on, right? So they ask both Stephen and Paul to take a lie detector test. And the result? They both failed. So instead of getting clearer, the mystery just got twice as muddy. So now what do? You've got two main suspects, and the polygraph says both of them are being deceptive. The case looks like it's hit a total dead end. But the truth? The truth was finally going to come out, all thanks to one single piece of evidence that everyone had overlooked: a simple security camera.
This was the absolute game changer. A local news station gets their hands on security footage from Paul's apartment complex, and what does it show? It clearly shows Crystal leaving his place that morning, all by herself, getting into her car and driving away, totally fine. And just like that, in an instant, Paul Hargrave was completely cleared.
So with Paul totally in the clear, all eyes, every single investigator snapped right back to Stephen. But they had one huge burning question they had to answer. If Stephen was the one who dumped Crystal's car at that Motel 6, how in the world did he get all the way back home, across town, during a hurricane lockdown?
And this is how they pieced it all together. It was like following a digital trail of breadcrumbs. Okay, step 1. Surveillance video puts Stephen at a gas station right near the Motel 6. Step 2. They check his bank records and bingo, he bought a bicycle from the Walmart right next to that gas station. And the final piece of the puzzle? Another camera catches him riding that exact bike in the direction of his house. They had him. It was over.
So, faced with this rock-solid timeline, there was nowhere left for him to run. And the case moves into its final and, honestly, most dramatic phase, a confession, a trial, and a defense that you just won't believe.
Okay, so Stephen is completely backed into a corner, and he decides to make a deal. He says, I'll confess, and I'll tell you where Crystal's body is, but, and this is a big but, he had 2 conditions. First, the death penalty had to be off the table, and second, he wanted 24 hours of freedom to, quote, get his affairs in order. I mean, can you imagine? But the investigators were desperate to find Crystal, so they reluctantly agreed.
So what was the motive he gave? Well, according to Stephen, they started arguing about her new boyfriend. And he claims the fight escalated when Crystal criticized him in the bedroom, saying he wasn't dominant enough. He said that in that moment of rage, he strangled her. His exact words were, "It just happened."
So at the trial, his defense lawyers grab onto this confession and build their whole case around it. They use a specific defense allowed under Texas law called sudden passion. The idea is basically this. They argue that what Crystal supposedly said provoked him so much that it created this immediate, uncontrollable rage. And because of that, his charge should be knocked down from murder to something less.
But then, Stephen gets on the witness stand himself, and the story completely changes. I mean, it goes from dramatic to just unbelievable. He totally abandons that sudden passion defense. Now, he's claiming Crystal got hysterical, and he was just trying to calm her down by giving her a big hug, and she just went limp. He was essentially claiming that he hugged her to death.
Yeah, the jury didn't buy that for 1 second. Not one. They rejected his completely absurd story. They found him guilty of premeditated murder, and they sentenced him to 50 years in prison.
And in the end, this whole tragic story really just leaves us with this one deeply unsettling question. It makes you wonder, right? How does a decade of what someone perceived as love and devotion just curdle into a jealousy so intense, so possessive, that it becomes a motive for murder?